everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We will be doing a methodology breakdown for Verra's VM0041 methodology, which focuses on the reduction of enteric methane emissions from ruminants through the use of feed ingredients. In our agenda today, we have 8 topics we'll cover, and these include a little bit about Envision blockchain, Guardian overview, a recap of our previous webinars, our policy development checklist, an introduction of VM41, about feed innovations, how emission reductions are calculated, then we'll go over our schema, workflow, and do a demo on the Guardian. So about Envision blockchain solutions builds applications for the Web3 space, and we focus on guiding organizations through 3 major milestones on their Web3 journey: use case analysis, proof of concept development, scaled deployments, and we're also the builders and maintainers of the Guardian. So as you may know, the process of designing and collecting the supporting data for carbon claims is heavily manual and prone to errors. This can be due to a variety of factors, including poor data quality, a lack of assurance, potential double counting, greenwashing, and an overall lack of trust. The Guardian is here to address these issues by leveraging a cutting-edge policy workflow engine. The Guardian can mirror the standards and business requirements of regulatory bodies, creating extremely flexible digital methodologies known as DMRV. This approach not only helps organizations ensure compliance with regulatory requirements, but it also enables them to streamline their carbon accounting processes, improve data quality, and reduce the risk of errors and inaccuracies. You could think of a policy inside of the Guardian as a digital version of a methodology, and to the right, you could see an example of that. By using the policy workflow blocks like Legos, you could design your desired workflow, which we'll look at a little more when we go into our demo. At the heart of this ecosystem are 4 key technologies that enable us to deliver trusted and transparent solutions for the carbon market. First, we use decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. DIDs are globally unique IDs that allow individuals and organizations to generate their own identifiers using systems they trust. By using DIDs, we ensure that carbon credits are issued to the correct party and that they cannot be duplicated or manipulated in any way. Second, we use verifiable credentials, or VCs. VCs are digital documents that provide information related to the subject, the issuing authority, the type of credential, specific attributes of the subject, and evidence related to how the credential was derived. By using VCs, we can ensure that carbon credits are issued only to those who meet the necessary criteria and that the credits themselves are valid and trustworthy. And third, we use verifiable presentations, or VPs, and VPs are a collection of 1 or more VCs. And to the right, you can see an example of our VP here, our verified presentation, where you see those cards at the bottom that we call the trust chain, and that'll show every step from the very beginning of this process. So if we're verifying a VVB as a standard registry, or we're verifying project data, you'll see all of that down there. Now we'll go into a recap of our past webinars. Each webinar focuses on a specific methodology from our open source library, and it's aimed at helping our users and anyone interested in the Guardian to understand how these methodologies can be streamlined for efficient implementation. We've covered methodologies from Verra, Gold Standard, and CDM, and you can find videos for each one of these at the Envision Blockchain YouTube channel. So as you can see, we have some from Verra that cover agriculture and land management. We also have some afforestation, reforestation policies that are methodologies from Verra, Gold Standard, as well as CDM. And we have some that are lighting. They're focused on lighting. We also have energy efficiency. At the top here, you could see the CDM methodology for methane recovery, which is somewhat similar to the one we're doing today. We have AMS3BB, which is also for electricity, VM44, that's focused on biochar, and PWRM1, which is for plastic waste collection. In this slide, we'll discuss the essential steps you can take to create a policy for the Guardian. And creating a well-defined policy is crucial for effectively implementing the Guardian tool into your projects. So let's go through these steps together. Step 1 is to identify the standard and an appropriate methodology. So you want to begin by identifying the relevant standard and methodology that aligns to your project's goals and requirements. And this will serve as the foundation for developing your policy. Step 2 is to review the standard and methodology documents. You'll want to make sure that you read through the documentation provided by the standard and methodology, ensuring that there's a comprehensive understanding of their guidelines, criteria, and principles. Step 3 is to identify roles, processes, and requirements. By identifying the various roles involved, you'll be able to define their responsibilities in the Guardian, then determine the necessary processes and requirements outlined by the standard. Step 4 is to identify input parameters and equations. So understand the specific input parameters and equations used in the methodology. These will be essential for accurately calculating and reporting the correct values. If you're using a policy in our open source library, then the equations will just need to be filled out using our forms in order for them to be auto-calculated. Creating a new policy is different because the equations all have to be mapped out using a program like Excel spreadsheets, for example. And then that information will have to be implemented using our policy configurator. Step 5 is to create a workflow and schema. This is when you would develop a clear workflow and schema that outlines the step-by-step processes for using the Guardian within your project. And this will help streamline operations and ensure consistent application. And step 6 will be to build a policy for the Guardian. Now we'll move into an introduction of VM41, which is a methodology for the reduction of enteric methane emissions from ruminants through the use of feed ingredients. VM41 is designed specifically to reduce methane emissions from animals' digestive systems, targeting methods to mitigate methane production in livestock. This methodology emphasizes using feed components known to actively reduce methane emissions during animals' digestion. VM41 provides a systematic method for accurately measuring and verifying reductions in methane emissions, ensuring precise evaluation of the implemented strategies. Now, some applicability if you're looking to use this methodology. VM41 applies to project activities aiming to reduce methane emissions in livestock by introducing specific feed ingredients known to mitigate methane production. This methodology is exclusively applicable to ruminant animals within the project scope, so animals like cows, sheep, goats, etc. Specific criteria include compliance with national or subnational food regulations, absence of negative health impacts on animals, and adherence to manufacturer-defined feeding instructions for the feed ingredient. Emission reductions from activities or feed ingredients not directly targeting methane cannot be claimed under this methodology to prevent overestimation of reductions. The project must confirm the usage of the feed ingredient throughout the livestock operation and ensure no increase in manure emissions due to its use. For projects operating prior to implementation, reliable data is necessary for quantifying baseline emissions. In cases with no available farm records, proof of animal groups allocated to project areas are required. Where significant changes in manure emissions occur due to the feed ingredients, this methodology accounts for methane and nitrous oxide emissions using IPCC Tier 2 estimation methods. And here are some applicabilities that will not fall under this methodology. So if projects are focusing on an overall livestock management improvement without a specific emphasis on introducing feed ingredients, then they would not qualify for this methodology. Initiatives involving non-ruminant livestock species, as VM41 specifically applies to ruminants. Projects implementing feed ingredients or activities that do not directly aim to suppress methane production within the digestive system of livestock. Projects failing to comply with regulations concerning feed and food standards, animal health impact assessments, or those deviating from manufacturer-defined feeding instructions for specific feed ingredients. And initiatives unable to confirm the consistent usage of feed ingredients, or those showing an increase in manure emissions due to ingredient usage without proper mitigation measures, would not be applicable under this methodology. Now a little bit about feed innovations that are currently out there. So we have the first one on this list as seaweed and plant-based additives. They contain compounds that actively inhibit methane production in the digestive system. Fermentation modifiers play a crucial role by optimizing microbial activity, resulting in reduced methane release during digestion. Probiotics and enzymes aid in digestion, breaking down feed more efficiently and minimizing methane generation. And the final one on this list is going to be nutritional balancing, which ensures the right nutrients are delivered, supporting healthy digestion and reducing excess methane production. Now, how are the emission reductions calculated? And this is based on the VM41 calculation approach. So first, we could look at the decision tree that is provided by the methodology. So in our digital policy, we have outlined all of these different scenarios to streamline the process for the user. When we demo this policy, you'll see that these questions have been included in the project form, and based on what you answered, the correct calculation approach will automatically be selected so that you only provide info for the parameters within those options. So if I said yes to the first baseline emission question, which is this one here, then I would only be filling out information for option 1. Then after filling that out, I'd be asked this question about the project emissions. And if I select yes, then I'd only be submitting information for option 1. And here we see the final equation within the methodology, and it applies to all the calculation approaches that you saw in the previous slide. Here we see that the emission reductions are calculated by subtracting the project emissions from the baseline emissions for all the farms that are included in the project. And this is also what we mint against at the very end. Now going into our schemas and workflows, we can take a look at our Excel. This is just an example of what it looks like, but this is the actual one that we used. So at the very top, you see that we separate our columns by required field, selected disclosure, we allow multiple answers, schema type, parameter, the question, and finally the answer. The answers that you see here are just demo values. So we start off with our project details. Each one of these gray rows are going to be our schema. So this would all fall under the project details schema. And we have information here for the project location, the project participants information, as well as crediting period, monitoring period, what sustainable development are included in this project, or SDGs, and any compliance with laws or non-compliance, and further information that anyone would want to include there. Then we go into the methodology specifics, and this is the questions that we have set out to determine which calculation method you'll be following. So whether it's option 1, 2, or 3, we separate that as individual sheets where you would put data into. So we could look at option 1, where you can add your farm, you could add livestock, and you'll see all of this reflected within the form. Then we have our project emissions, and it follows a similar, where we have our farms, you have your livestock groups. And this is our policy workflow, which when we go into the policy configurator, you'll see similar steps outlined there. And we have 3 different roles here, which are going to be our project proponent in blue, Verra in that pink or peach, and the VVB in green. So the first step would be the project proponent creating a document, a design document, where they could fill out the information you saw in Excel, so the project details, baseline emissions, project activity emissions, and finally, we would be able to calculate their net GHG emission reductions and removals. And they would submit all that information. Verra would add the project to the project pipeline. Then the BBB can review, and they could either reject or approve that information that was submitted. The project activities begin monitoring. And this is when any parameter that falls under the monitoring of that methodology. So whether you have to monitor it monthly, yearly, or every 5 years, you should keep track of that and be updating it appropriately. Then you would submit your monitoring report, and the VVB will then review that and reject or approve it. Then Verra would add the project to the project registry, do a review, and if it's approved, then the VCUs are issued. So now that we went over the Excel design and the workflow, you can see how we turn a methodology into a digital policy with the Guardian. By using the information from the methodology PDF, we can design an Excel that reflects all the decisions a user needs to make and add the calculations in order to streamline this tedious process into a simple form that only requires data. And now we can go into a demo of the Guardian, and we could look at VM41 in there as well. So here, let's do a quick tour of what we have right now. So we have VM41 that's already been imported using this button here. So you could either import from file, import from IPFS, or look at our open source policies. By clicking this policy configuration button, we can see the workflow, which is going to follow those steps that we saw in the workflow in the PowerPoint. So we have our Verra, the steps that Verra is going to take. We have steps for the project proponent as well as the VBB all in here. You see our trust chain. And we have blocks like this calculation block here, where all the coding for that would be inserted. And that's how we have all the data that's input calculated in this policy. Then we can go ahead and look at the schemas. These are all the ones that belong to VM41, as that's the only policy that we have imported. If we click create a schema here and click on advanced, you can change this to encrypted verifiable credential, where now when you add a field, you can select private. So if it's information like an address that you don't want to disclose, you can go ahead and select private, and that will not be shown there. We also have our property fields here, where if this was the geographical location of maybe the GeoJSON, then I can go ahead and type location. And I can select this property. to help us compare different projects. We could also see the token that's associated with this policy here, which is going to be a VCU. And now going back to policies, if we wanted to compare a project, we have this button here. And we can select VM41. And if we had another one imported, we could select that too and have a comparison of those two policies. Now we're going to select register and start the process. So we're going to go ahead and click create user. I'm going to click it twice. And we can go to virtual user 1 and select the project proponent. Then I'm going to go ahead and go to virtual user 2 and select the BBB. Now we're going to give the BBB a name. For this demo, I'll just put BBB. We see it says waiting for approval. So this is where the standard registry would have to approve the BBB. So we're going to go back to the administrator, which is our standard registry in this case, and select approve. They could also open the document here and see what information was submitted, like the BBB's name. We're going to select approve. You could also see the different tabs up here that we have approved BBB, project pipeline, monitoring reports, token history, trust chain. And as we go through this whole process, we'll keep moving through each one of these. Now we're going to go to the project proponent and select new project. This is where we're going to be inputting all our data. So for the text, I'm just going to use X's so we can move through this quickly. We're looking at all the project details information. So you saw the location. Now we're in the project proponents information, what methodology is being used, the project start date. We're just going to select today. And for the end date, we'll just select a year from now, just for this demo. Monitoring plan, compliance with the laws, sustainable development, and any further information. And now we're moving into the questions that I showed in the decision tree. So have you performed planned on-site direct measurements on farm emissions? And I'm going to select yes for this. That's going to take us to option 1. We're going to name this farm 1, animal group 1. The group name, we could just say they're cows. And then you're going to start putting in your values. Now here you can see add entity and add entity. The first one's going to be to add livestock, and the second one's going to be to add a farm. So we're going to go ahead and add livestock here. So we're going to have group 2. The group name for them could be sheep. And we're also going to put in our data. Now we'll select, has meta-analysis been conducted to estimate the emission reduction factor? We're going to select yes, and that's going to take us to option 1 for the project emissions. We're going to name this farm 1 as well and start putting in some data here. And then we're going to add group 2. And select create. Now we see it says waiting to be added. Select project pipeline. And here the standard registry can now see all the data that we input. And they also see all the auto-calculated fields. So as you can see, I did not input this. This has been auto-calculated. And then we're going to select add. Now it says waiting for validation. So we have to first go to the project proponent where they have to assign who they want the VVB to be. So right now we only have one VVB. We're going to select them. And we can go to the VVB's account. Go to projects. They can also view that same document that the standard registry got to see. And we're going to select validate. Now we're going to go to the project proponent, where now we see this new field here and this new button of add report. That's our monitoring report. We're going to go ahead and leave that the same for this demo and just select create. And then we're going to go to the VVB. Go to monitoring reports and click verify. If we selected view document, it'd be all the information from that monitoring report that would reflect there. Then we can go to the standard registry, select monitoring reports, and now we see the Mint button. Again, they can click here and see all the information from the monitoring report. By clicking Mint, they're verifying that information. Then we can go to token history, and we see we minted 55 tokens for this project in that monitoring period. And now we're seeing our VP or verified presentation where we have all the information about the token, the recipient name, the token amount, mint date. We also see what policy it is that this belongs to. We could add a description in the beginning here that would reflect in this VP. We also see where in dry run, and the issuer was our administrator in this case. And then we're seeing our trust change. So we see every single step that we've taken. You see the policy was created by the administrator. We have the project created. You can also see the automatic completion of project fields. So if we click here, you're going to see those fields reflecting there. So some of these are all automatic. Those are automatic. The only values I put in were 10s and 1s. Everything else is being auto-calculated. You could see the project validation by the VVB, the monitoring report, all the way to when we mint the VCUs, and you can see the file for that too. You see your token ID, the amount, and the date that that was minted. You could also find more information about us on GitHub. You can find us on Discord, or you can message us directly at Envision by our email, which is info@envisionblockchain.com, or our website.